I'm Anna, 35 years old, and the lead night shift nurse at the emergency room of St. Joseph Medical Center in Denver, Colorado. My life is far from easy, but I've grown used to the fast pace, 12-hour shifts, and the sound of ambulance sirens blaring at 3 a.m. I've learned to set aside my own emotions, to stay calm when a patient dies right in front of me. But nothing in all those years prepared me for the worst shock of all, the one that came from the very people I trusted most, my parents. My daughter Ellie, 9 years old, is the only light in my darkest days. She has these cold, gray eyes filled with depth, always observing the world with a quiet sharpness rare in a child. Ellie was born during my final year in nursing school. Her father, Mark, was working to finish his MBA at the time. We were young, exhausted, but hopeful. I worked part-time while Mark interned. Every cost from diapers to Mark's tuition was mostly covered thanks to my parents, Walter and Diane. They used to say helping us was because family comes first, but over time, I realized their definition of family revolved solely around my younger sister, Megan, and her two children, Caleb and Zoe. If Ellie was the moon, Caleb and Zoe were the entire night sky in our parents' eyes. Megan had always been the golden child. She went to college in California with a full scholarship from a family education fund I was never told existed. When I asked for help with a deposit for my first apartment, my mother said bluntly, "You should learn to manage on your own." But when Megan got divorced, they moved in close to her to help with the kids, and Ellie, she got late Christmas packages filled with discount toys and cards with no messages inside. I tried to let it go. I told myself that as long as I loved my daughter enough, nothing could hurt her. But Ellie grew up, and she started noticing. When Caleb got a brand new iPad for his birthday, Ellie got a discounted coloring book. When Zoe had her ballet recital, my parents drove 2 hours to watch, flowers and a GoPro in hand. But for Ellie's art competition, my mom said her shoulder hurt, and that driving that far to see some kid drawings wasn't worth it. I confronted my mother privately. It was after an awkward Thanksgiving dinner, dishes done, the house finally quiet. I stood at the sink drying the last plate and said, "You know, Mom, I've noticed you always make that honey roasted chicken Caleb loves, but there's never anything on the table that Ellie enjoys." She didn't look at me. She calmly folded a napkin and said, "Don't be dramatic, Anna. I love all my grandkids the same. Megan just lives closer. It's easier to help her. You're always busy." That sentence hit harder than a slap. That same week, St. Joseph was in a staffing crisis after a multi-car pileup on I-70. I was asked to take 3 consecutive night shifts. Lisa, my regular babysitter, was in Florida caring for her sick mother. With no other options, I called my parents. I didn't want to beg. I'd trained myself not to sound weak around them. I kept my voice steady. "I need help watching Ellie for 3 nights. I'll pick her up right after my final shift. There's no one else. Please." The silence on the other end stretched so long I almost regretted asking. "We'll try to rearrange things," my father finally said flatly. "When are you dropping her off?" "Tonight, around 6, I'll pick her up Saturday morning." My mother just added, "Tell her to bring something to keep herself busy. We don't have anything here for bored kids." I bit my lip until I tasted blood, but still said thank you. I had no other choice. That afternoon, I loaded Ellie's small suitcase into the trunk. She sat quietly in the back seat, hugging her stuffed beaver, Baxter. I checked the rearview mirror. She was staring out the window when she whispered, "I won't bother them. I'll be quiet and good." That sentence chilled more than the January wind. But I didn't cry. I wasn't allowed to cry. I just gripped the steering wheel tighter. Saturday morning, I left my 3rd consecutive night shift completely drained. The entire night had been a blur of traffic accident victims, constant monitor alarms, and barely 5 minutes of sitting down. Still, the thought of seeing Ellie kept me going. I had pictured that moment all morning. Ellie running to the door, hugging me tight, and the 2 of us heading home for a late breakfast of pancakes and fresh strawberries, like we always did on weekends. But as I turned onto my parents' street, a wave of unease crept in. Both cars, Dad's silver SUV and Mom's beige sedan, were gone from the driveway. The house was shut tight, curtains drawn like no one had been home for days. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I called their phones. No response. Disbelieving, I dug out the spare key from my wallet and opened the front door. The house was cold, eerily empty. There was no sign Ellie had ever been there. No backpack, no little shoes, no toys lying around. My heart pounded as I rushed to the kitchen, and that's when I saw the note. Neatly placed on the counter, written in my mother's familiar slanted handwriting. Sorry, we couldn't continue watching Ellie. Temporary arrangements have been made until you're available to pick her up. Contact Child Protective Services for more details. Mom and Dad. I froze. My mind went blank. I had to read the note 3 times before the meaning truly registered. Then, like a blade driven into my chest, I shot up, hands trembling as I called CPS's emergency line. After being transferred a few times, a woman named Monica answered. When I gave her the details, she confirmed. Yes, we do have a record of a child named Ellie Foster placed into emergency care 2 days ago. The person reporting claimed to be her legal guardian, stated they could no longer provide care due to a family crisis, and that the child's mother was unreachable. They're not her guardians, I nearly shouted. I'm her biological mother. I have full custody. I only left her with them temporarily because I was working a hospital shift. I understand, Miss Foster, Monica said calmly. We'll need to meet in person to verify and complete the process to return her to your care. She's currently with a temporary foster family, very experienced and nurturing. We can provide the address if you come into the office this afternoon. I collapsed into the chair, phone still in hand. The pain of betrayal mixed with the crushing guilt was suffocating. I had trusted the wrong people. I had handed my daughter to the ones I still clung to as family. I picked up my phone, about to try calling my mother one last time, when a notification popped up. A message from Megan, with a photo attached. Mom and Dad are spoiling the kids like crazy. Caleb just had his first diving lesson, and Zoe got her hair braided Hawaiian style. Dinner tonight at a cliffside restaurant, totally luxe. I opened the photo. There was my mom in a floral robe, cocktail in hand, beaming. Dad had his arm around Caleb while Zoe posed in a sparkly beach dress. The caption from Megan's account burned into my screen. The prize vacation with the grandparents. Truly the luckiest family ever. The time stamped 48 hours ago, the exact time Ellie had been placed into foster care. I don't remember if I screamed or threw my phone, but when I picked it back up, my hands no longer trembled, they were clenched. No more tears, no panic, just a quiet, smoldering rage ready to ignite. I opened Megan's message and replied with one line. The May abandoned Ellie. No ellipses, no room for excuses. I silenced notifications. I was done. That afternoon, I was at the CPS office with every document in hand. Proof of custody, my hospital work schedule, all communications. Monica escorted me to the foster home, a small wooden house tucked into a quiet neighborhood. She spoke gently. She's okay, but quiet, likely still in shock. She's in the backyard. I stepped outside, my breath catching, when I saw Ellie curled up on an old swing chair, clutching Baxter. When she looked up and saw me, she shot to her feet and ran straight into my arms. Mommy, she cried, her voice cracking like glass hitting tile. I thought you weren't coming back. I held her tightly, feeling her little heart pound against my chest. She sobbed silently, her body trembling. I wrapped my arms around her like they were the only thing keeping us both from falling apart. I whispered into her hair, I'm here now. No one gets to leave you again. This time, I wouldn't forgive. Not anyone. That night, I sat alone in the quiet apartment. Ellie had fallen asleep on the couch, Baxter in her arms, while I opened my laptop and began piecing together the nightmare that had unfolded. What my parents did couldn't be called a misunderstanding. It was a calculated plan, meticulously executed, and I needed evidence to prove it. I started with Megan's social media. Within less than an hour, I had saved over 10 photos, From them leaving the house, arriving at the airport, to having dinner at the Sunbury Beach Resort in Maui. One post from 2 weeks ago read, "Counting down to Hawaii. Mom booked the tickets, hotel, even planned a seafood menu for the kids." Enough to debunk any claim of a last-minute decision. I pulled up my texts with Mom, scrolling to the conversation from when I asked if they could watch Ellie. She said, "We can watch her if you pack enough toys." Not a word about leaving the state, no mention of handing my daughter over to the authorities. I took screenshots of everything. The next morning, I returned to the CPS office. Monica introduced me to Ellie's newly assigned case supervisor, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Miss Taylor, with cropped brown hair and thin-rimmed glasses. She led me into a private room and spoke calmly. "We've confirmed your legal custody. However, per protocol, we'll need a full report to finalize Ellie's return to your care, and—" she turned a page in the file. "We'll be launching an investigation into your parents' false claims." I looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "I want to file formal charges," I said. "They didn't just lie to the authorities. They abandoned a child and deliberately severed the connection between me and my daughter. They need to be held accountable." Miss Taylor nodded, unsurprised. "This is a serious case. We'll forward everything to the Special Investigations Unit, but I'll need your full cooperation, work with an attorney, provide all documentation, and prepare for the possibility of direct confrontation." I nodded. My throat was dry, but my fists were clenched. I wasn't afraid anymore. That evening, I called Rachel, my best friend from nursing school, now a child welfare attorney. When I told her what had happened, she nearly screamed through the phone. "They did what?" "Anna, this isn't just negligence, it's a major violation of child protection laws. We'll handle this step by step. First, I'll draft an official statement to CPS and the district attorney. Then I'll need everything you've got. Texts, photos, proof of the vacation planning, and if you have any witnesses who saw them leave with luggage, even better." I remembered our neighbor, Lorraine, who constantly complained about my parents blocking her driveway. I ran over and knocked on her door. "They left early Thursday morning," she said before I could even explain. "Big suitcases, the works." I asked where they were off to, and Walter said, "Off on vacation for a week. Don't worry about Ellie, someone else has her." I thanked her, asked to record her statement, and promised to protect her identity if needed. The next day, Miss Taylor called to say Ellie had officially been released back to my care. I picked her up from Mrs. Foster's home, the emergency foster provider who had taken Ellie in. When Ellie saw me at the door, she said nothing, just ran into my arms as if afraid I'd disappear again. While Ellie packed her things, Mrs. Foster pulled me aside on the porch, her voice barely above a breeze. She hasn't said much, but the first night she asked me, did I get sent away because I wasn't good? I told her no. But Anna, she needs to hear that from her mom, again and again. I nodded, my throat tight. On the drive home, I looked into the back seat and reached for Ellie's hand. "I'm sorry I left you in a strange place. You did nothing wrong. You are the most precious thing I have, and no one has the right to discard you like that." She looked at me, tears trailing down her cheeks, but her lips stayed pressed together. Then she gave a small nod. Not forgiveness, but a quiet understanding that this time her mother wasn't going anywhere. That night, after Ellie had fallen asleep, I opened an email from Rachel. Subject line, "Initial complaint against Walter and Diane Foster, URG." I opened the attached file, a 12-page draft outlining abandonment, false reporting, impersonation of guardianship, and potential emotional trauma to a minor. At the end of the document, Rachel had handwritten a note. "You're not just protecting Ellie, you're ending a toxic cycle you've endured your whole life." I sat there for a long time, watching my daughter's peaceful face under the soft glow of her nightlight, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would see this through to the end. Just 3 days after I filed a formal complaint against my parents at the Jefferson County District Attorney's office, a call came in from an unfamiliar number. I had just gotten Ellie to sleep and was making a cup of peppermint tea when the phone rang. A calm, deep voice spoke on the other end. Ms. Foster, this is Inspector Howard with the Maui Police Department. We've received a cooperation request from the state of Colorado regarding a suspected case of child abandonment. Can you confirm your identity, please? I set the tea down, my fingers trembling slightly. After confirming my information, he continued. According to our records, Mr. Walter and Mrs. Diane Foster, currently staying at Azure Bay Resort, have been accused of providing false information, abandoning a minor, and impersonating legal guardianship. We'll be questioning them tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. local time. Do they know yet? I asked, my breath catching. No. We're keeping the approach unannounced to follow protocol. But you should prepare yourself. If they react strongly, the media might get involved sooner than expected. The next morning, while I was packing Ellie's lunch, another notification came in. This time, a text from someone I never expected to speak up, Victoria, my sister. Are you seriously ruining the whole family's vacation over a misunderstanding? Do you know the police just came to the resort? They questioned Mom and Dad in front of my kids. Caleb cried. Are you happy now? I didn't reply. The next message followed almost instantly. You always blow things out of proportion. They were just trying to help. But of course you called the police. I shouldn't be surprised. You haven't considered us family for a long time anyway. I put the phone down and took a deep breath. This wasn't about protecting our parents. Victoria was protecting an image. Her dream vacation was falling apart, and instead of blaming the people responsible, she pointed the finger at me, just like always. Less than 24 hours later, an 11-second video popped up on TikTok. Hawaiian police officers in uniform knocking on the door of Suite 4B, top floor of the resort. A middle-aged man in a terry cloth robe opened it, clearly annoyed. A woman's voice could be heard behind the camera. Early morning drama? Police looking for grandparents who ditched their grandkid to go party? Someone get Netflix on this. The clip spread so quickly it ended up in a local Facebook group called Maui Moms and More. Within 2 hours, there were hundreds of comments under the headline, "Grandparents dumped grandchild on the state to vacation with their favorites, the definition of favoritism." Another post from an account called @TravelWithGrace read, "Having breakfast at the resort when cops escorted an older couple out. Heard whispers they left their grandkid behind to go on vacation with their chosen ones. Felt like a movie, not real life." I was tagged in several posts by an old college acquaintance, now a reporter for the Denver Daily, who recognized Ellie's name when the CPS case was quietly leaked. She messaged me directly. "Anna, I know this is personal, but if you want to speak up, tell your story the right way. I'm here. The media's already twisting the narrative." I hadn't decided yet, but when I saw a comment that read, "Bet that single mom just dumped the kid on the grandparents and now wants sympathy," my blood boiled. They didn't know anything. They hadn't lived on that razor-thin edge between exhaustion and duty, hadn't spent 3 nights without sleep, only to find their child discarded like an unwanted item. Meanwhile, Victoria continued her digital assault. She posted a photo of Caleb crying in front of their hotel room, captioned, "A child dragged into adult drama. Families don't deserve this." Not a single mention of Ellie. I texted Rachel. We decided to request a temporary no-contact order if Victoria kept spreading misinformation about Ellie. Reputation could wait. My daughter couldn't. That afternoon, I received a copy of the police report from Hawaii. Walter stated, "We figured Anna would be fine. She always overreacts. We didn't abandon her. We asked CPS to keep her for a few days." Diane said, "I thought she'd understand. She's overly sensitive." When asked why they didn't notify me, they said, "We didn't want to distract Anna while she was working." The final line from the officer in charge read, "The reporting parties showed no remorse and viewed their actions as minor. Further investigation into criminal liability is warranted." I finished reading, set the report down, and turned to Ellie, who was drawing quietly at the table. I sat beside her and said gently, "If anyone ever asks you why I'm doing all this, you can tell them because my mom refuses to be disrespected and refuses to let anyone treat me like an afterthought." Ellie looked up and nodded. Saturday night, just as I was sorting through Ellie's medical records to forward to her therapist, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. Anna, it's Olivia. Aunt Olivia. Your mom's sister. The voice on the other end was husky, low, familiar, even though I hadn't heard it in years. Aunt Olivia? I whispered, surprised. I didn't think you'd call. I saw the posts about you and Ellie online. It's spreading fast. At first, I didn't want to get involved, but then I realized I owe you the truth. I stayed silent, waiting. Years ago, when your mom promised to help me with college tuition, she suddenly changed her mind because Uncle Richard needed a new car. I kept quiet to avoid family drama. But Anna, this isn't the first time she's decided some people just matter less. I swallowed hard, my hand clenched. Somehow, hearing that someone else had been a target too made me feel less alone, even if it was still bitter. I haven't spoken to them in years, she continued, but if you need someone to testify about Diane's behavior in the past, I'm willing. Thank you, really, I said, my voice thick. I don't think I can stay silent anymore. The next morning, just as I was about to take Ellie to her second therapy session, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and nearly dropped my keys. Mark, Ailey's father, stood there, holding a paper bag, face full of guilt. Hey, Anna, I didn't think I should come, but I read the news about your parents and Ellie. I crossed my arms, standing in the doorway. I thought you were in Arizona. It's been almost a year since you called. I know, and I was wrong. I want to know if there's something I can do. Maybe if you're not comfortable, I want to revisit custody. Ellie needs a more stable environment. I stared at him, speechless for a few seconds. A stable environment, I said coldly. Ellie was abandoned, Mark. By my parents. I'm suing them. And you? You didn't call on her birthday. You haven't paid child support in 4 months. And now you think you can walk in, call yourself dad, and decide what's best for her? He stammered, I just want to be part of her life. My voice stayed calm, almost eerily so. Then start by apologizing to her, not by trying to take her. I won't let anyone, not even you, hurt Ellie again. I shut the door. The way Mark vanished and then popped back in like nothing had changed. I wouldn't let that disrupt the one thing I was trying so hard to rebuild, Ellie's trust. That day's therapy session was held in a cozy room with animal murals and string lights. Dr. Lisa Clay, a specialist in childhood trauma, had deep-set eyes and a warm voice that seemed to ease Ellie within the first few minutes. I sat in the waiting room while they talked. Every minute felt like it stretched into 2. But when Ellie came out, her face looked lighter. Not healed, but as if a tiny door had cracked open. Miss Lisa said, I can draw what I feel. Ellie handed me a picture. This is me and you, and this is the black hole. I looked at the drawing, heart tightening. A swirling dark spiral stood between 2 figures holding hands, my daughter and me, both being pulled towards something vast and cold. In a child's eyes, betrayal needs no explanation. We're going to walk out of that black hole together, I whispered. I promise. Ellie nodded, then hugged me, the first time she'd initiated it since she came back. That night, after Ellie fell asleep in my arms, I reopened Aunt Olivia's email. The subject line was simple, don't let history repeat itself. I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't change the past, but I could stop it, here, now. And I would do everything in my power to make sure Ellie never grows up feeling like an afterthought in her own family. The trial against my parents took place on a bleak late March morning inside Jefferson County Courthouse. Diane sat quietly next to her attorney, an old colleague of my father's, silver-haired in a dark tie, looking exhausted, like he already knew there wasn't much he could defend. Walter remained composed, but for the first time, he didn't avert his eyes. He looked straight at me as I entered the courtroom, Ellie's hand in mine. The charges were read clearly. 2 counts: child abandonment and knowingly providing false information to a government agency. The prosecution laid out the evidence: CPS reports, the Maui police file, social media posts proving their Hawaii trip had been planned weeks in advance, along with testimonies from myself, our neighbor Lorraine, and Ellie relayed through her therapist. After 3 sessions, the judge decided not to pursue a full criminal trial, but sentenced them to 12 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, and mandatory participation in at least 6 months of supervised family counseling. I didn't feel relieved nor vindicated, but I knew one thing. It was a first step, a wedge driven into decades of silence and fake smiles at holiday dinners. The first therapy session was held in a small gray-walled office with a round table where no seat was more elevated than another. The therapist, Dr. Maria Ellison, didn't offer polite smiles or soothing words. She looked each of us in the eye and opened with one sentence. This is not a space for defense. It's a place to dissect what this family has chosen to ignore for decades. Victoria arrived late, her face cold as ice. She sat directly across from me, didn't say hello, didn't look at Ellie. Diane avoided everyone's gaze, and Walter crossed his arms, nodding briefly when addressed. Dr. Ellison got straight to the point. So, who will be the first to acknowledge that Ellie was treated completely differently than Victoria's 2 children? Silence. She waited, then looked directly at my mother. Mrs. Foster. I don't think we meant to do that, my mother began, her voice faint and shaky. People always say I play favorites, but Victoria, lived closer. It was easier to help. Anna always did things her own way. I let out a bitter laugh, not out of amusement, but because the irony was too loud to ignore. You mean I had to pay for being independent? That Ellie and I had to be invisible because we didn't need constant rescuing? Victoria tossed her hair and snapped back. You always exaggerate. Mom helped me because I needed help. I never asked anyone to sacrifice for me. Dr. Ellison interrupted, jotting something in her notes. Both daughters seemed to believe help was distributed by need. But this is about value, not convenience. Did Mr. or Mrs. Foster ever ask what Ellie needed, what she liked, how she felt being left behind? Silence. Ellie sat beside me, still gripping her colored pencil and scribbling in her notebook, but I knew she was listening. During the 3rd session, something unexpected happened. Walter, the man who had always stayed quiet and let Diane handle the emotions, suddenly spoke. I think I blamed Anna too much, because I saw myself in her. The way she's fierce, unyielding, I didn't understand it, and I felt ashamed that I never protected her from her mother. Diane turned sharply, eyes wide. What did you just say? I mean it, Diane. You've always favored Victoria. I didn't say anything because I thought staying quiet would keep the peace, but looking at Ellie, he paused, swallowing hard. She didn't do anything wrong. She's just the next one to suffer. Victoria stood up as if to leave, but Dr. Ellison stopped her with one question. If it had been your daughter abandoned in a government office, would you forgive the person who did it? She didn't answer, just sat back down. For the first time, I saw something in Victoria's eyes that wasn't anger. It was fear. The session ended in heavy silence, but for the first time, I walked out of that room no longer feeling like I was the only one carrying the burden of proving the pain was real. On the way home, Ellie held my hand and whispered, Mom, Grandpa said something right today. I squeezed her hand, glancing up at the pale gray sky. Not everyone gets an apology, but sometimes a single moment of truth is enough to let the healing begin. 4 months after our final counseling session, life for Ellie and me had slowly begun to settle again. The crack in her heart was still there, but it no longer consumed her, every glance, every thought. She was going to school regularly, had rejoined her old art class, something she once firmly refused. Ellie still flinched at raised voices, but the light in her eyes had returned. The same light I thought had vanished forever in that cold CPS office on that fateful morning. I returned to work at the hospital, and one late afternoon after a shift, Dr. Hansen called me into his office. Anna, I know the past few months have been hell for you, but I've also watched how you handled it. Held on and never gave up. We need a new coordinator for the ER training program. It's a regular mouse role, flexible for single parents. What do you think? I could barely believe my ears. It was a position I'd dreamed of but never dared to ask for. I looked him in the eyes, trying to steady my voice. I'll take it. And thank you, not just for the opportunity, but for believing in me. My new schedule allowed me to pick up Ellie on time every day. Our afternoons became little pockets of peace, homemade mac and cheese, strolls in the park, or simply lying together reading comics with soft jazz playing in the background. I realized that sometimes normal is the most extravagant gift of all. Ellie's 9th birthday approached. Last year, her party had been forgotten, buried under chaotic shift swaps and the icy indifference of my family. This year, I vowed it would be different. We held it in the backyard of Mrs. Martinez, the woman who opened her home when Ellie had nowhere else to go. She had become part of our lives as if she had always been there. Beside her was Mr. Martinez, who once quietly fixed Ellie's backpack strap. And Kelly, my coworker, who had brought me dinner more times than I could count when I was too tired to stand. The party was simple: balloons, a chocolate cake by Ellie's request, and a game table with hand-drawn cards she had made herself. What brought tears to my eyes was seeing her laugh, surrounded by our chosen family. Not the ones who shared our blood, but the ones who stayed, who loved her, no strings attached. While I was setting out more plastic plates, a message lit up on my phone from an unknown number. Anna, it's Victoria. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet, but I'd like to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't her first attempt to reach out, but this time there was no punctuation, no accusations, no excuses. Just a wish. Small in words, but massive for someone like Victoria. I replied nearly an hour later. We can talk, but not today. Today is Ellie's day. A few days later, we met at a quiet cafe near Ellie's school. Victoria arrived early, holding a cloth tote bag. No makeup for once. She hesitated, then pulled out a hard-covered notebook and placed it on the table. I don't know where to start. This is Caleb's journal. He wrote about how he felt when he saw the police at the hotel. He asked why Ellie didn't get to come too. I cried when I read it. I was ashamed. I flipped through a few pages. The messy handwriting of a 9-year-old, raw and haunting. Ellie sad. Where is Ellie? Why didn't Grandma bring her too? Victoria continued. I can't undo anything, but I want to fix what I can. I posted a public apology. I deleted everything that blamed you, and if Ellie doesn't want to see me, I'll stay away. I nodded. Thank you for starting with the truth. But Victoria, rebuilding trust takes more than apologies. It takes actions, time, and most importantly, boundaries. I understand, she said, not defensive for the first time. I'll do my part if you'll let me. I didn't say I would, I just sat silently, lifted my now cold coffee and looked her in the eyes. We've spent years in silence and pretending. If you really want to change, start by making sure Ellie never has to pretend to smile again. That evening, I came home to find Ellie decorating her pencil box with glittery stickers. She looked up and asked, Mom, is Victoria coming to the party? I shook my head. Ellie simply nodded and said, That's good. You know what? This is the first birthday I really felt chosen. I didn't reply. I just stepped closer, placed my hand on her back where her little heart beat strong, and whispered to myself, I choose you every day, and this time I choose myself too. 4 months after the final family counseling session, Ellie and I met with Walter and Diane for a supervised visit at the Jefferson County Family Intervention Center. The room was plain, cloth-covered sofas, a round wooden table, and a whiteboard in the corner bearing a small message in black print. It's never too late for the truth to be heard. Ellie walked in holding my hand firmly but not timidly. She wore the navy mood dress Kelly had given her for her birthday, her hair tied neatly in a high ponytail. Beside me stood Dr. Lisa Clay, our trusted trauma therapist, there to ensure the emotional boundaries were protected throughout the meeting. Walter and Diane were already seated, facing each other, avoiding my gaze and Ellie's. My mother held a gift bag, a gesture strictly against the guidelines, and was gently asked to place it outside the room. She looked flustered, but didn't object. My father was so silent he nearly disappeared into the background. When Ellie was invited to sit, she didn't rush. She stood tall, looked her grandparents in the eye, and pulled out a folded piece of paper from her backpack. In a calm, steady voice, beyond her years, she read, "I don't know why you left me. I was really scared. I thought I did something wrong, but Mom said it wasn't my fault. I just want to know, if it had been Caleb or Zoe, would you have done the same thing?" The room was so quiet I could hear Dr. Clay's pen on her notepad. Walter swallowed hard, then suddenly stood and knelt in front of Ellie, a man in his 60s, thin, knees hitting the floor, hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Ellie. There's no excuse good enough for what we did. We were wrong, all the way wrong. I don't expect you to forgive us. I just want you to know it was the adult's fault, never yours." Ellie stared at him for a long moment. She didn't cry, didn't look away. She simply asked, "Then why didn't Grandma say anything?" Diane's eyes filled with tears, but her voice held its familiar defensiveness. I thought you'd be okay. Your mom's strong, and I thought that meant it was the right thing." For the first time, I didn't get angry at that excuse. I just looked at my mother, really looked at her, and understood some people grow up never learning that saying "I'm sorry" doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. "Ellie needs to feel chosen, Mom," I said. My voice wasn't sharp, just clear. Not like a vacation plan, like a person who is loved. Truly. Not if only. Not we thought. No one spoke after that, and somehow it was enough. On the drive home, Ellie was silent for the first 10 minutes. Then she asked softly, "Mom, if I don't forgive them, does that make me a bad person?" I pulled over, turned to face her. "No, you get to decide your own boundaries. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's choosing not to let the hurt control you forever. And if you're not ready, I'll be the wall between you and them until you feel safe." Ellie nodded, resting her head against the window. I thought she'd fall asleep, but then she whispered, "I think I need more time, but at least today I got to say what I really feel. I used to keep it inside because I thought it would make you sad if I was sad." I reached for her hand. "You don't have to hide how you feel to protect me, Ellie. It's my job to protect you. Your job is to feel every part of what's real." That night, Ellie drew in her room. A new picture. This time, there were 3 figures. Me, Ellie, and Walter. No dark swirls, no gray clouds. Just 3 people standing under a tree, each casting a long shadow on green grass. I didn't ask, didn't interpret. I just knew that for Ellie, healing wasn't a straight line. It was a journey with pauses and rest stops, but always with something solid to hold on to. Weeks later, I received an email from Dr. Clay. She wrote, "Ellie has made significant progress in identifying emotions and establishing personal boundaries. I believe with continued support, she's on a very positive developmental path." I printed the letter and pinned it to the kitchen corkboard, right next to my shift schedule and Ellie's latest artwork. It was a reminder. We can move beyond what once felt impossible if we're loved the right way. I've come to understand that family isn't blood. Family is who stays when you fall apart, who listens when your voice is too tired to scream, who chooses you every day. Not out of duty, but out of real, abiding love. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. Ellie and we don't need permission to have peace, because peace, in the end, isn't something others give you. It's something you build from broken pieces with your own hands. Anna's story is a powerful reminder that true love doesn't come from bloodlines. It comes from choice, responsibility, and respect. When betrayed by her own family, she didn't stay silent or seek revenge. She stood up, protected her daughter, and redefined what family truly means. In real life, not everyone is loved the right way from the start, but everyone has the right to set boundaries, heal, and build a home rooted in kindness and strength. What do you think about Anna's choices? Was she too firm, or did she earn the peace she has today? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.